On this episode of the Catholic Echo podcast from the Diocese of Youngstown, brought to you by the annual Diocesan Appeal and Cumulus Radio Youngstown, we're talking about Catholic Schools Week with Bishop David Bonnar and Superintendent of Schools Dr. Stephen Jones. Find more about this episode's topic, including articles from the Catholic Echo, at www.catholicecho.org/podcast. And now the host of the Catholic Echo podcast, Dennis Viviano.
Hello and welcome to the Catholic Echo podcast. It's Catholic Schools Week, which runs January 26th through February 1st. Here to talk about the significance and events of the week is Bishop David Bonnar. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dennis. Great to be here.
Now, Bishop Bonnar, my first question is, what is the primary mission of Catholic schools, and how does Catholic Schools Week highlight that mission?
Catholic Schools Week has been around for a long, long time. I think even it goes back to the days when I was student in Catholic school. And I think Catholic Schools Week is an opportunity for every Catholic school to celebrate their identity, their legacy, and their possibilities. Catholic education is a foundational part of our society. And, I think that those who go to Catholic schools, it makes a difference in their formation. There's a formative element. Their minds and their hearts are formed in the spirit of Jesus Christ, always a sense of service for others. Catholic Schools Week is a time for the church to shine the spotlight on our schools, on our communities. Having been a parish priest, it's interesting, the parish often is intricately connected to the school. And yet, the school has its own identity in and of itself. And there's great pride, and there's history, and there's so much to celebrate. And it's always great when Catholic school comes. There's one certainty, though, that comes with Catholic Schools Week, from my past experience, is that it's always going to snow. It's always the end of January, beginning of February.
It's that time.
And there's always going to be snow.
All right, so bring your snow boots for that. And then, what do you usually do? How do you take part in Catholic Schools Week?
Well, when I was a pastor, I was intimately involved in the school celebrations every day. There was some different focus. It would involve perhaps a grandparents' breakfast or a grandparents' tea where the students could invite their grandparents into the school. There would be, a fun day where there would be competitions within the school itself. There would be a day to give appreciation to the teachers and to kind of salute them for all the good they're doing. As a bishop, I'm in a much higher level and it's more global. But what I try to do is I try to, first of all, support the teachers. In the past, I've written a letter to them, encouraging them in their mission. I always also try to visit some of the schools. In fact, this year I will be going to the Catholic school in Massillon to celebrate Mass. And then usually after Mass, I converse with the students or I walk around the school and visit. Now, that's not the only time I visit schools, though. So I visit schools throughout the year, and I always come away from that experience enlivened and excited. You can feel the pulse and the energy in every one of our schools.
That's excellent. What is your vision, for the future of Catholic education? I'm sure you've seen the changes over the decades. How could schools adapt to meet the needs for today's students?
Well, I think the first one is there has to be mission and identity. There has to be a clear mission rooted in Christian values, in communion with the church. So mission is number one. Number two, an identity within that mission, a Catholic identity. Our schools are not meant to be just schools. They're meant to be Catholic schools. And that's not easy because increasingly our students, not all of them are Catholic. And so we want to behold their tradition, their faith tradition, but at the same time we want to be true to our tradition and be Catholic. I think it's also important that we build community. You really can't talk about a Catholic school without talking about the community, because the community supports it. And that community involves not just the administration and faculty and staff and the students, but it involves parents and it involves parishioners who help in that regard. The final piece in this for me that I'm just very, very conscious of is ensuring safety and security. We hear again and again of these tragic stories that happen in schools, violence, of shootings, and what have you. And it's so important that we keep our schools safe because they house our precious cargo, our future, the children.
And obviously that's one of the challenges. Any other challenges you see?
Well, I think, as I mentioned previously, one of the real challenges is being Catholic in a non-Catholic world. But if we look at that in terms of evangelization and passing on the faith, it really isn't a challenge, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow the faith and invite others into a relationship with Jesus Christ.
How can parishes better engage with Catholic schools during Catholic Schools Week and beyond?
Well, I think the first thing is to pray with them and for them. Education is not easy, whether it's public or private, but we need to pray for all those who are involved. Secondly, I think we need to support. There are many ways that people can support their school through scholarships, through fundraising efforts, and just through helping the school to sustain its operations. And then 3, to just become involved, to be present, because we're always stronger when we're together.
Any other message you hope to get across to students, teachers, and staff?
First of all, the time goes quickly. They go to school on that first day, they're little tykes, and almost in a blink of an eye, they're walking out the door, going on to the next phase of their life. So I would just want them to recognize how quickly the time goes. Sometimes it may not seem that way to them, but it goes quickly. Secondly, to really appreciate that time and to make the most of it. This can be the time of their life. This is a foundational moment where they are really building roots, but they're also preparing to spread wings and go out into the world. And before they do that, though, it's important that they know Jesus and they know the faith. They know what they need to know about the world.
Very good. Bishop Bonnar, thank you as always. Now we will continue our discussion of Catholic Schools Week with our Superintendent, Dr. Stephen Jones. Much more to come when the Catholic Echo podcast returns.
Please join Catholic Charities by helping to support the Warm Hearts for Warm Homes campaign, formerly known as Keep the Kids Warm. The Warm Heart for Warm Homes campaign helps to provide direct utility assistance to families with children, working poor adults, and older adults on fixed incomes. Last year, Catholic Charities agencies impacted thousands of people through utility assistance efforts. Unfortunately, this year the need for heat and utility assistance continues to rise. Catholic Charities is asking for your help to make Warm Hearts for Warm Homes a success by giving to your local parish, online at www.ccdoy.org, or by calling Catholic Charities at 330-744-8451.
It's time for Patron Saints of the Diocese of Youngstown with your Bishop, David J. Bonnar.
Our Lady of Hope refers to a Marian apparition to 6 children in the war-torn village of Pontmain, France, in 1871. Our Lady encouraged them to pray for protection, and 1 week later, the Franco-Prussian War ended. She is a patron saint of protection, especially during war and difficult circumstances, and patron of Our Lady of Hope Parish with 2 church locations in Orwell and Kinsman. Her feast day is January 17th. So happy feast day of Our Lady of Hope to our friends in Orwell and Kinsman. Our Lady of Hope, pray for us.
The Catholic Echo is the media arm of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown, and it seeks to inform and entertain Catholics in our 6-county diocese by forging stronger connections to our parish communities and highlighting the many blessings of Catholic life in our region. If you have a story idea for the Catholic Echo magazine, podcast, or website, send an email to catholicecho@youngstowndiocese.org. We'd love to hear your ideas.
Welcome back. I'm Megan Farrell, Communications Director in the Diocese of Youngstown, and we're continuing our celebration of Catholic Schools Week. This year, it's from January 26th to February 1st, and the theme is Catholic Schools, United in Faith and Mission. I'm joined in the studio today by Stephen Jones, our Superintendent of Catholic Schools, to talk about affordability for our Catholic schools. Thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
For families interested in affording Catholic education for K-12 schooling, what are some of the options available in our diocese to help them?
Well, thankfully, both in the diocese and the state of Ohio, we have lots of options to support families who want a Catholic education for their children. Let's think on the most general level first, and of course that's EdChoice, the vouchers or scholarships that are provided by the state. state. These are in the headlines all the time, and there's some lawsuits and things like that. But the reality is, this is a great move by the state of Ohio to support families and democratize, really, the idea that people should be able to have an education that fits with their family's values, traditions, and identity. We've always had ed choice in America. It was just usually driven by whether or not you could afford a private school or not.
Right.
What Ohio has done, I think beautifully, is take away the barrier, or at least really lower the barrier for most people so that they can afford an education that they want for their children and for their family. So ed choice is the number one kind of option out there. That doesn't cover all the tuition at some schools, and of course some families get a larger scholarship than others based on income. But the state of Ohio has done a great job here of making this accessible for all the families in Ohio. And I know there's always, the concern about whether or not you're taking money from public education. Ohio actually funds this completely separately from public education.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so this is one of the biggest misunderstandings we have out there.
Yes.
There's this idea that there's a pot of money called education, and if private schools are taking money out of that, then there's less for the public schools. Right. But the state of Ohio actually funds these on totally different lines. It's taking this scholarship does not directly take money from a public school any more than fixing a street light does, or employing, groundskeepers in the park or something like that. The state of Ohio has done this, in my judgment, the right way. I'm all for giving families choice in education. I think it's the morally responsible thing to do, and I'm glad that Ohio is leading the way in that. Yeah. But we have things other than ed choice as well. The diocese has scholarships through the very generous donations and support of a number of families who just themselves benefited from Catholic schools when they were growing up, or their grandparents did, or something like that, and they want to honor that legacy. So there's several scholarship opportunities, both at the diocesan level and at the individual school level. And of course, donors made specific recommendations. I want it to go to families from this area or something along those lines. But the reality is there's a lot of money out there that can support people who want a Catholic education. Yeah. We're very much in the debt of those donors.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is there's ed choice that goes through the state of Ohio. They have to make an application there.
Right.
There's some at the diocesan level, and then there's some at the school level.
That's right.
So for a family that's looking to apply for that from kind of a paperwork perspective, how many applications do they need to fill out, and what kind of deadline should they be thinking about if they're thinking about 2025, 26?
Yeah, great question. And the easiest answer here is that it starts at their local Catholic school, or the one they are interested in their children attending. All of our Catholic schools are prepped for welcoming a family in, saying, look, here's how you apply for financial aid. There's actually an online program that most of us use to sort of assess a family's ability and how much financial aid they're going to need. And they can walk you through applying on the state side as well. Frankly, it's not that complex. I mean, there's paperwork, it's the state, but it's pretty easy to do, and our schools are pretty good at helping families walk through that. I get a call a week or an email a week from a family that just says, I'm interested in Catholic schools. Where do I start? And my answer is always, it starts at the Catholic school you want your kids to attend. That's also a chance for the parents to kind of get to know some of the staff and really to kind of ferret out, this is where I want my kids, or maybe I need to look at that one down the road a little further or something.
Is there a specific deadline? I know I've seen in the past for, say, some of the diocesan scholarships.
There is. We award the money as we can. You're fine usually up until late spring. You're available for just about everything. Some of the individual scholarships operate on a different schedule just because the donor set it up that way. But we're just now in admission season, basically January, February, and early March. So everything is still out there. You can walk through that as you go through the applications part. Frankly, it's usually just part of the application of the school. In an afternoon, you can not only have applied to the school, but you can have applied for most of the financial aid that's out there as well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so in our celebration of Catholic Schools Week, we know that there are a lot of schools that are having, say, open houses or other things, not only to celebrate their current families, but also kind of let the community know what they're doing. Are there anything that you would lift up in terms of those opportunities or things folks should look out for?
I mean, first, think for a second about what you're investing in. Our sons and daughters are going to be at their schools 7, 8, if they're involved in sports, sometimes up to 9 or 10 hours a day. The community you choose to educate your children, it matters because it's the primary reference group they're going to have outside the home. open houses in particular are a great way for you as a parent to kind of get to see the school. And yeah, it's best face forward and all that. I mean, but you get to meet some students, you get to meet some teachers and ask some questions. I remember back in South Carolina where I was a school principal, we had a family come in on open house and they had a baby with them, and I was talking to them and we were walking around. And I said, so, what grades are the children that are applying to the school? And they said, well, this was a high school, mind you. They were there 15 years in advance
wow.
because they wanted to know about the school. I was like, well, okay, that might be a little too forward thinking.
Yeah.
But open houses are a great opportunity. Again, hit a school's website. There'll be an ad for open houses. January and February are heavy times for all of these opportunities. The schools open their doors. Some of them also, for instance, will do an admissions Tuesday, and you can go and get a tour every Tuesday in the month of January. Okay. Some schools do one day, others do it one day a week for a month, something like that.
Yeah.
All that's on the website of any particular school.
Great. And I'll just point out to our listeners to find the websites for all the schools in our diocese. You can go to doy.org/schools, and you'll find a directory for our Catholic schools and more information, specifics about the affordability, some of the scholarships we've been talking about. So thank you so much for these great insights. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about how other folks in the diocese are supporting excellence in our Catholic schools.
It's time for Patron Saints of the Diocese of Youngstown with your Bishop, David J. Bonnar.
St. John Neumann emigrated from Bohemia to the U.S., where he became a Redemptorist order priest and Bishop of Philadelphia. He helped build nearly 100 schools in 8 years before his unexpected death in 1860. He is a patron saint of immigrants, sick children, Catholic education, and St. John Neumann Parish in Portage County, with 2 church locations in Mogador and Rootstown. His feast day is January 5th, so happy feast day of St. John Neumann to our friends in South Portage County. St. John Neumann, pray for us.
Please join Catholic Charities by helping to support the Warm Hearts for Warm Homes campaign, formerly known as Keep the Kids Warm. The Warm Heart for Warm Homes campaign helps to provide direct utility assistance to families with children, working poor adults, and older adults on fixed incomes. Last year, Catholic Charities agencies impacted thousands of people through utility assistant efforts. Unfortunately, this year the need for heat and utility assistance continues to rise. Catholic Charities is asking for your help to make Warm Hearts for Warm Homes a success by giving to your local parish, online at www.ccdoy.org, or by calling Catholic Charities at 330-744-8451.
So welcome back. Megan Farrell here on the Catholic Echo podcast with Stephen Jones, Superintendent of Catholic Schools for the Diocese of Youngstown. We're continuing our celebration of Catholic Schools Week, which is observed this year from January 26th to February 1st, with the theme Catholic Schools United in Faith and Mission. So next we want to discuss opportunities for our listeners who may want to support Catholic schools. To start our conversation, we previously recorded an explanation of our scholarship granting organizations, so we'll take a listen to that.
My name is Stephen Jones, and I'm the Superintendent of Schools here in the Diocese of Youngstown. If you're watching this, I know you're already invested in the excellence of our Catholic schools here in the diocese. But I want to take a moment and talk to you about a new opportunity where you can further invest in Catholic education. Best of all, this new opportunity allows you to direct money to the schools, and it won't even cost you a nickel. It's called an SGO, a scholarship granting organization. The state of Ohio allows all Ohioans to direct part of their state tax money to a list of approved charities, and Catholic schools are excellent recipients for those funds. If it sounds too good to be true, it almost is. But I invite you to follow the QR code on your screen now, or go online and look up doy.org/SGO. This is a great opportunity for you to be part of the mission of Catholic schools here in the diocese, and I'm glad to recommend it to you.
What an interesting opportunity. So tell me a little bit more about these scholarship granting organizations. How did they come about? How did we set that up for us in the diocese?
Of course, I've only lived in Ohio since June, and when I moved up here, people were trying to explain the SGO to me, and ours in our diocese is called the Good Samaritan Fund. And to be honest, I kept thinking, I'm misunderstanding this because this is too good to be true.
Yes.
So I kept asking people, I'm sure they were starting to think, who did we hire? He's not getting this concept. But the reality is an SGO, it's a really inventive opportunity by the state of Ohio so that a family can dollar for dollar get a tax credit on their state tax for money that they donate to an approved charity, for instance, a Catholic school.
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity for you to actually direct part of your money to a Catholic school of your choice, whether you have kids there or maybe it's just the neighborhood Catholic school. Maybe you want to honor somebody who went there from your family a long time ago, and you can do so really without it costing you anything because it's a dollar for dollar tax credit.
Right.
There are limits, of course. It's $750 a person or $1,500 for a married couple, but that's still, you get 20 or 30 people doing that, 20 or 30 families doing that, and it really can add up and give the schools some much needed resources to, for instance, provide more scholarships or, enhance their programmatic options or something like that.
And the way we have that set up, folks can support a specific school, right? Or they can support an area of greatest need. Talk to us about how those are distributed and what kind of impact they're having in our schools.
So when you sign up for the SGO, you can direct how you want the money to be spent, at least in terms of which school it goes to. Or you can just do the general fund of the Good Samaritan Fund, and then it just goes to the school that has the greatest need or wherever we see the most direct need. SGOs in our diocese are mostly used for scholarships. They're supposed to be used for scholarships. There are some other opportunities out there where you can direct money, for instance, to a capital campaign or something like that. But our SGO is really about directly supporting families who are trying to afford a Catholic education.
Yeah.
So that's the way ours is set up. That's not true everywhere. There are other places where you can, it's the same basic idea, but you can direct it more towards like a capital need or something like that.
Yeah.
We prefer to support the families directly.
Yeah. And that's prioritized, right? When you're saying area of most need, that's like income level.
Right,
Usually,
yeah. So I don't think it's set up such that you could say, I'm going to give a scholarship to this family. But what you would do is pick a school and say, I want my money to go towards their scholarship fund, knowing that they use a variety of tools to assess the need that any family who applies for financial aid has. And by the way, the Diocese of Youngstown, we use third-party, kind of neutral companies to do that so that you can have confidence that we really are directing the money towards the area with the greatest need. And that's important because we want to make sure that we open the doors wide to who can be in our Catholic schools. We don't want money to be a barrier for anybody.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shouldn't be just a privilege for the wealthy.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely. In addition to this tax credit, right, what are some other ways that you've seen grandparents, alumni, godparents, other community members contributing to our Catholic schools?
Well, I mean, obviously there are ways, they can make donations to capital programs and things like that. But let's think beyond money for a second.
Right.
Sometimes we need human energy. We need person capital, not just financial capital. So, there are a lot of grandparents who will volunteer, for instance, to take tickets at a game. Let's say you've got grandchildren on the 6th grade or 7th grade basketball team. Well, you're going to go to most of those games, but maybe you can take one of those games and sit out and collect tickets or work the concession stand or something like that. Our schools really only can do what they do when we have people there to staff the various needs. So there are a lot of volunteer opportunities that you can get involved in. Not huge time commitments, right? I'm not asking you to show up at the school every day at 7 o'clock in the morning and work the bus line, although you can do that too if you want to.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of ways you can have some fun, for instance, at a football game, basketball game, volleyball game, but also kind of contribute to the well-being of the school. My wife volunteers at the school where our kids go, and I mean, every kid in the school knows who she actually substitute teaches there sometimes too. We go to a basketball game, she got 20 people lining up to hug her. I don't even know who half these kids are, It's really a beautiful opportunity to get involved and be a blessing, not only to the school, but sometimes in the life of a really particular kid.
Yeah, knowing them by name. That's awesome.
It's really beautiful.
I actually wanted to ask you about 529 plans because I know, for example, in our family, we have grandparents that want to contribute to that kid in specifically, right? Individually. So a lot of folks don't know that 529 plans can be used for K-12 education. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So 529 plan, there's a kind of a mental idea that those are always connected to college and university life. You're using that to pay for your student to go off to the college or university of their choice. But actually, 529 proceeds and the money there can be used to pay tuition even at a high school or middle school or elementary school for that matter if you want to. It has to be an accredited school. And of course, there's things other than 529s out there as well.
Okay.
But that's another great opportunity for a family, let's say, that wants to very specifically say, I'm going to support my grandchild, my niece, my nephew, whatever. The 529 can do that as well. And one of the nice things there is, especially with the rise of ed choice, families are paying less for tuition out of their pocket because of ed choice. Which means the 529 can still have some money left over in it to continue to grow to support college and university life later on. But you can also kind of answer the immediate need of tuition at my local Catholic high school. So it's kind of the best of both worlds in that sense. And you can use it for both short-term immediate needs, but also still thinking towards the future for college and university. I mean, after all, our schools are prep schools, right? We are trying to prepare them for the next step of their education. And really, we're trying to prepare them for a life well lived, and that takes resources to do.
It does, and increasingly people need, whether it's going into the workforce, they need a certificate. Right? I mean, there's just, a post-secondary is very necessary now.
I have this conversation once a month, or maybe even more often than that, with families who will tell me, well, I'm not really sure education is worth it. There are so many great examples of people who, without a formal education, did really well, and I always say the same thing. Great, God bless those people. I'm thrilled for them. You don't know about all the ones who didn't make it, right? We don't know their names. The evidence is really clear. Education is still super helpful for opening doors and helping you advance in your career. If you want to think of it purely in kind of those terms, that's what a degree does for you. And that's why it's still important that our Catholic schools prepare students for the next step of their education.
Absolutely. That's great. And so that 529 plan, that's instead of the tax credit, that's the SGO, it's a pre-tax contribution, right?
That's right. So there's still some savings for the 529, but it doesn't work exactly the same way. You're basically just taking some money and not having to pay a certain tax bracket on it because you're earmarking it for later on you'll use it for education. So it doesn't have quite the immediate thing that like the SGO does, but it's still a great way to prep for the future and prepare for education.
Well, these are great. Quality education is such a benefit to our whole community. So thank you, Stephen Jones, for your work to pursue.
Always happy to be here.
We really appreciate the excellence in Catholic education. Thank you to our listeners for joining us in celebrating Catholic Schools Week. For more articles on Catholic schools in the Diocese of Youngstown, visit catholicecho.org or follow our diocesan social media. Search for Diocese of Youngstown on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us.
The Catholic Echo podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Your host has been Dennis Biviano. Have a blessed day, and may God be with you.